Well, I heard early about Czechoslovakia because we got the waves of refugees coming out from Czechoslovakia in 1938, 1948, 1968, and many prominent people who became refugees. So Czechoslovakia was a name, I would say. I knew about the country, even if I first time was there in 1969. I knew nothing about Bulgaria or Romania, but Czechoslovakia was rather well known.
In August 1968, we had, of course, been following very much, what was happening in your country, the Prague Spring, and Alexander Dubček and all this we were following with great interest. And I was in the embassy in Moscow at the time, again, I say as a very junior officer, and I had traveled on the 20th of August, I had traveled to Warsaw. I was going back from Warsaw on the 21st of August, 1968, and you come to the border between Poland and the Soviet Union, Brest-Litovsk, because of the difference between the gauge of the railroads. So you have to wait for 3-4 hours until they have changed all this and so on. And so I noticed that on the station there were a lot of soldiers, Soviet soldiers, and they were all over all the time, so there was nothing special about that, but they were all in field uniforms. They were all in field uniforms. So I said, why is this to myself and so on? I understood only when I arrived in Moscow, because I didn't dare to ask them, why are you in field uniforms? That would be a funny question. But when I arrived in Moscow, I understood why they were in field uniforms. They were probably going to be sent to be part of the invasion of the Warsaw Pact countries minus Romania to Czechoslovakia.
Já pocházím z nomenklaturní rodiny. Otec byl prostě v 60. letech velice vysoce postavený funkcionář. Jo, asi tak to nejdůležitější, co byl, že v roce 68 byl ministr zahraničí. On vlastně, co by ministr zahraničí, tak jako jeden z mála vlastně těch vyšších funkcionářů nebyl v Praze, tím pádem nebyl internovaný, takže mohl co si podnikat. Tak on letěl do Vídně na velvyslanectví a snažil se prostě nějak se spojit s Prahou, to se nedařilo, tak odjel právě do New Yorku, kde zasedalo valné shromáždění a tam prostě protestoval proti okupaci.
In these days I started to follow the news and the political developments around, and we followed the Prague Spring very closely, I must say, reading newspapers, listening to broadcasting reports. And it was very high hopes for what happened here, because we all knew that the Soviet bloc, the Soviet style communist men were very authoritarian, no freedom for people, and stagnation in very various parts of society. And also in 68, 69 there were demonstrations, rallies against the Soviet invasion.
Even though we didn't know very much, or understand even less. But we took part in the demonstration. You know, it was a huge demonstration, one of the biggest in Sweden during the 20th century, organized by the Social Democrats, by the way, in Stockholm. But I should say that it was very fast forgotten, all this, you know. And I realized that I don't know anything about this, you know. I don't know the country, I don't know the history, I don't know anything. So I went here 69 together with some friends, and we tried to understand. The problem was that we didn't speak any Czech, and the Czechs didn't speak any other languages. We wasn't aware of, which I have learned many years later, all these protests who took part up to the 21st of August 1969. We were disconnected to this, you know. We didn't know anything, and it was gray, it was dull. People didn't take any notice of you, beside the växelhats, and the hookers.
This was July, I think, 1969, and it was difficult to get in contact with people. We didn't manage actually to get good conversations. We saw destroyed roads. I mean, there have been tanks driving on normal roads and destroying the asphalt, or what is it called? And there were destruction in Prague, in the center, after shooting, etc. So we could see it on a lot of the National Museum at the Václavské náměstí.
Daleko horší než všechny ztráty ekonomické případně, nebo jinak hmotný, byly ty škody morální, že skutečně se lámaly charaktery, a v té mý generaci ročník 47, tak prostě tam to bylo zcela patrný, že možná čtvrtina lidí emigrovala, pár jedinců hned skočilo na tygra a začali vesele kolaborovat, a ostatní se pokoušeli tak nějak přežít, a jak říkám, ta polovina 70. let byla hodně depresivní, protože lidi odcházeli, emigrace. Sebevražd, bylo dost sebevražd, spoustu lidí začalo chlastat. Bylo to, po všem, my jsme chodili do Reduty, čili jazz výborný, hudba výborná, ale tam se za večer vypilo zřejmě několik lahví staré myslivecké. Jo? Skutečně tehdy lidi se snažili nějakým způsobem se uvolnit, zapomenout. Bylo to dost tristní, bylo to takové bezčasí. Jo? A ta metafora, myslím, se opakuje často, že až ta charta vlastně začíná novou epochu, kdy čas začíná běžet. Když byla charta zveřejněna, tak asi týden na to mi právě Zdeněk Pinc nabídl, jestli nechci podepsat chartu taky. A tam jsem neváhal ani vteřinu, protože jsem to považoval jako za samozřejmou povinnost vůči svému milovanému profesoru Patočkovi. Jeho přednášky jsem navštěvoval nejen na fakultě, ale pak i v těch soukromých bytech. Takže to bylo to nejmenší, co jsem vlastně mohl jako aspoň symbolicky pro něj udělat.
Mně to přišlo jako jedna z dalších petic. Jako se to odvolávalo, charta na helsinské dohody, a nebylo důvodu to nepodepsat. Takže mi to nepřišlo nějak dramatický. Dramatický to začalo být až teda o 14 dní později, když si přišli pro Jitku v 5 hodin ráno policajti. No. Že ona to podepsala taky, a Mě nenašli, protože já jsem bydlel u ní a byl jsem jako zapsaný jako adresu u matky. A pak mě poslali předvolání oficiálně, to jsem se musel dostavit a začali vyhazov z práce, vyhazov z odboru. Nejdřív mi policajti řekli, hele, to si vyberte vězení, blázinec, vystěhovat. Samý dobrý volby. Nicméně to vystěhování nakonec nám přišlo docela dobrý nápad. Jsme byli mladí a ještě člověk by chtěl něco dosáhnout v životě. A když jsme potkali Zdenka Mlynáře, který odjížděl, tak jsme mu říkali, že taky asi, že odjel, ten nám říkal, no, vy byste se hodili do Švédska, jakože jsme nebyli sezdáni a dlouhý vlasy a nemanželský dítě, takže takhle jsme to zkusili jako požádat na švédské ambasádě. No.
Já jsem přijel k těm hranicím a počkal jsem 5 minut přes tu půlnoc. Jo, nejel jsem do 24 hodin, mě nebudete poroučet, kdy já budu překračovat hranice, že? Já jsem se tam šel vymočit, ještě do příkopu a teprve 5 minut po půlnoci jsem přejel, ale ty dětkové, co tam seděli, ty to vůbec nezajímalo. Ty měli totiž nařízeno mi udělat důkladnou prohlídku. To měli jako, a ten jeden říkal, ale když to má všechno zapečetěný, tak co prosím tě, tak nebudem přece ty pečetě oddělávat teďka, kolik je hodin, tam ten jeden, ten spál, jo, toho vytáhli, ten velitel, že toho vytáhli, museli ho probudit, že se na to šel podívat, že ten chodil kolem a kopal do pneumatika, říká, Michelin. A co je tohle? No to je peřina. A on říkal, jede do Norska, tam je zima. Tak jeďte.
V časopisu Ministerstva obrany, tuším Signál, vyšel dlouhý článek o teroristech, nebo to byl takový dvojčlánek vlastně. Jeden byl v Rudých brigádách a Aldo Moro, tehdy co byl zavražděný Rudýma brigádama, a druhá část byla, tam byly fotky Konůpek, Jitka, já. A bylo to o inženýru Petrovi, což měl být Petr Úl a skupina Mstitelé, ale prostě my jsme tam byli ty fotky, ale v tom článku jsme nebyli, no v podstatě se snažili dávat dohromady ty teroristy, který v té době opravdu to byla hrozba v západní Evropě a v Itálii a v Německu. A nás, jako, že vypadáme stejně, že dlouhý vlasy, fousy. A nejdřív psali o Jitce, že je trocista, maoista, a že já taky, o maoistech jsem nevěděl nic. Nicméně, když jsme byli v tom Švédsku, tak ty, co nám nejvíc pomáhali, vlastně to byly tyhle ty levicové skupiny.
We had many illusions about China and the Cultural Revolution. We were not very well educated about it, but it was fascinated and we were attracted by alternative approaches as Mao's China was. It was very much fighting what we called imperialism, both the US imperialism, especially in Vietnam, but also what we call the social imperialism here in Eastern Europe and the Soviet expansion and Soviet aggression.
The Maoist movement in Sweden was mainly upper middle class, girls and boys. We were very few who came out from the working class, but that come to a very quick end. The whole 70s is all about the European left to get rid of its Maoistic past. The only thing which was good now in the backside here, hindsight, it was that it opened up for many people that Soviet Union was not a place where there was honey and milk, if somebody thought so. Most of the solidarity movements, whatever you can say, let's say Solidarność or Afghan society, they're all built by people of ex-Maoists, as you call them,
This was at the time when
Sweden was rather leftist. It was a very strong communist movement in Sweden. Very many groups, very aggressive at some time. I was not comfortable at all with that, and it was very difficult to be anti-communist because that was like being a Nazi almost. But you could more easily understand that someone worked for the freedom of Czechoslovakia or Poland or Estonia or Russia. That was sort of legitimate to do. So, and the more I started to know about this, the more interesting and fascinating it was. So that's how it started. And I started to go to demonstrations, small demonstrations and protests in Stockholm. Yeah, we handed out flyers and put up posters. And when we put up posters, we didn't always follow the rules because we used to glue them instead of putting up with tape, because otherwise they were rather quickly torn down. Some of us were taken by the police a couple of times, myself a couple of times for doing this. In 1978, before the 10th anniversary of the invasion, we planned a demonstration in this East European Solidarity Committee that I was a member of, and also the paper called Folket i Bild Kulturfront, which was a leftist magazine. We organized a good protest at the 21st of August, 78. We got it in a big park behind the Royal Library in central Stockholm, and I remember I released hundreds of balloons, red, white, and blue, you know, the Czech colors, of course, into the sky, and that was like the start of when we should start walking. So we walked to the city center, and about 3,000 people. Among others, Jiri Pallas, who was a publisher for forbidden music, spoke at this meeting.
To 10. výročí bylo jako velký, tam bylo několik tisíc, 3 000 snad lidí. Já jsem tam mluvil a Egon Lánský mi to překládal. Švédsky Sovět ur Čekoslovákem, takže Sovětský svaz opustit Československo. To hlavní požadavek byl tohle.
There were demonstrations, rallies against the Soviet invasion. First time I was taking part was in 78, 10 years after the invasion. Oslo was the biggest one, several thousand people, 3,000 or 4,000 I think. I was also not only as a journalist in working with Czechoslovakia, but also part of the committee organizing these things. And I think we had demonstrations 5, 6, 7 years after that. Also every 21st of August was a very important day for this leftist movement. At this time, one of the signatories from the Charta, Mr. Mikhail Konopek and his family came to Oslo. They left Czechoslovakia in, I think, 77 or early 78. And he was interested in cooperating with Norwegian media to highlight the situation here, to contribute to more information and knowledge. And then, after a long meeting with Mikhail in spring, April maybe, 78, we made a big interview with him, we printed the manifesto, and we planned to go here to visit Prague and try to find representatives for this new movement. And he had very good contacts, and they took we were met. I traveled in May '78 with a photographer. We stayed here 2 weeks. We had no money, so we stayed private. We lived private 2 weeks with at Michael's family. Very generous, I must say, and very confident for them. And we got in contact then with certain active people in the Charta circles here, and made a lot of what I will say exclusive stories and interviews with dissidents and spokespersons and suppressed people. What we did was not only to make this as a stunt in '78, we came back year after year, '79, '80, '81, '82, '84. So not 2 weeks every time, but 1 week, 5 days. Also, I traveled without any photographer eventually. So over time, I got the continuity in the contact with these circles and these persons.
In 1979, in February, I remember that trip very well. It was with 2 friends from the town of Göteborg on the west coast in Sweden, Margareta Hammar and Moritz Saarman. And this was mainly to meet people from the Charta 77. So we made contact with Jiri Hayek, František Kriegel, and also met with a newly appointed spokesperson of Charta, Stena Tominova. It was in her apartment, together with Jiri Dinspear and Václav Benda. And this was the first time they were together as spokespersons, and I was able to take the first photo of them 3 together. Well, they were all very friendly to us, smoking a lot, and yeah, very nice people. We were only stopped once by police, but I think it was like a minor traffic offense. But at that time we had Václav Benda in the car, so it was we were afraid that maybe he would recognize him, but it was just a traffic police. So he didn't, and nothing happened.
These were not people easily available. Many of them had police on behind them in their back all the time. For example, Peter Uhl had police outside his door. He couldn't have a walk in the park with his children without having security police behind him. So it was some conspirative behavior to get. I don't exactly know how these things were set up. We had, for example, scheduled an interview with Marta Kubishova, the female artist or former artist who were at that time a spokesperson for Charta 77. And I remember that one of the appointments were cancelled because she had observed these surveillance agents around her. But after some days, we got the green light to meet her and her husband in a flat somewhere here in town.
And it was on the birthday of Havel, the 5th of October, 1981 or 82, I don't remember, maybe 83. And I was invited through different friends to his birthday party there on Nabshezi, there where he lived. But we were surrounded by not only 2 desolated, uninterested Estebazi, but there was about 10 who was following us. Yeah? And we were discussing back and forth. Shall we enter the building? Because if we enter the building, they will take us. Yeah? And they will throw us out of the country. So we decided that we should not. We just went away. And I was able that very evening to meet with a friend, a close friend of Havel, and I wrote on a paper. I had 2 sheets or something. So I excused myself, explained the situation, and say that unfortunately I cannot come. I wish you all the best. And here is the question that I wanted to pose for you. And he was able to pass that paper or papers on to Havel.
So I think these friends we got here, the friends of his Mikael Konopek's old friends, they had access to the inner circles of this network. And we were totally dependent on them. We couldn't speak the language, we didn't know any persons. It was no mobile telephone or the internet. Especially from the start, we were absolutely totally dependent that these people could trusted us, had confidence in us. I think we behaved, so we earned it. We were loyal, we were discreet when it was needed.
Ale tak u nás to bylo do značné míry nejen teda tím přátelstvím s Michalem Konopkem, ale tím, že právě moje žena mohla jim tlumočit. Já jsem právě zprostředkovával rozhovory těch novinářů, Janem s Jiřím Dinsbírem nebo s jinými chartisty. Takže to pak měli vlastně exkluzivní rozhovor. Zajímavý bylo, že ty norští novináři v porovnání s jinými byli vždycky naprosto dokonale připraveni, jednak věděli, co chtějí a co nás, mě a mou ženu téměř dojalo, že prostě, aby byli nenápadní, tak první, co udělali, že si koupili v bazáru nějakou takovou obnošenou, ošklivou lyžařskou bundu, a aby splynuli s davem. Takže teda bylo umění až detektivní.
For me, this possibility to get the democratic forces here in Prague and Czechoslovakia to learn, it was really for a sort of a political eye-opener, because I had a very low understanding in my younger days for the importance of what we could call individual liberal freedoms. I could see here what lack of individual freedom really is, what the costs are for society and for people. For example, when we can see how the system can harass children for their parents' activities. So for me, I left politics, or this left-wing party collapsed also, and I grew up.
We were staging this demonstration, collecting money, collecting signatures. We were able to sing on the two demands, Soviet out of Czechoslovakia, support Charta 77. And we were able to, if I remember it right, probably some clerk will correct me later on, but I think we were able to collect about 100,000 signatures, which was huge. We collected about 25,000-30,000 Swedish krona, which is huge today. I cannot even recount how much it will be the value today. So that was the starting point for everything, you know.
Jsme zakládali takový spolek na podporu československé opozice. Tak jsme se dali, kdo bude předseda, a to jsem nechtěl. Já jsem říkal, já dělám desky a to se musím naučit švédsky a děti. Takže máme ale toho Janoucha, takže je profesor, takže to bude dobrá hlava, tak jsme teda jsem navrhl Janoucha. A ten Janouch teda potom z toho vlastně si udělal nadaci Charty.
František János was a speaker at one of our demonstrations. I remember I drove him from the demonstration to a very small office that the foundation had at Norrtullsgatan 65 in Stockholm. Well, we started to have contact with them after that. Well, the foundation started in 78 after there was this new film prize called the Monismanian Prize by film director Kenneth Fant. He gave the sum of 30,000 crowns to Charta 77, and there was this question on what to do with this money. How should we do? Should we send it to Charta 77 in Prague, or could that be a problem for them? So I know that František János asked Václav Havel on his opinion, and Havel checked with the others, and they said it's fine with us. There's no problem. You could please try to send it to us. And at this time, János proposed the idea to open a foundation in Stockholm, and then the foundations received afterwards many of the prizes that Havel and Charta 77 received.
What happened with me, I'm sorry to say, is that from 1970 I ended up for 4 years in a very far left group. I was skeptical all the time, but I was there. That was my problem. But when I broke out together with my wife and many other people in around 1975, I was very angry at myself having promoted dictatorship and extreme far-left ideas, having promoted hopeless things. I said to myself, I have to give something back. I have to do something to make it better, the balance. I got a friend by mail, Boris Weil, who was a Soviet dissident who came to Copenhagen, and I asked him in a letter, what would you suggest that I do to do something against communism, against dictatorship, which can make a difference? And he said, I think, and this was in the end of 1980, he said that I would suggest you take contact with František János in Stockholm. So in May 1981, János came from Stockholm, and we established this with the press, etc. And Torolf Rafto became the chairman, the first chairman. Konupek was press spokesman. I was secretary. And we kept on until after the November Velvet Revolution. During these years, we asked private persons to give every month money. We asked companies to give money, also municipalities, for example, Oslo. We actually managed to collect some money. And then we also did a lot of work towards the press. Konupek made an excellent job. He had a lot of contacts and developed other contacts. And he had his contacts in Charta 77 movement in Prague, so that we covered very much of the Norwegian press with articles, discussions, etc. That was another very important thing. The Norwegian public was supporting Charta 77 and democratic activity in Czechoslovakia very well.
Because from the foundation, we use this official channel of Tusex. It was something you had in Czechoslovakia to get hard currency. There were shops, Tusex shops, where you could buy things that were not available to people. Tusex coupons. The money was worth a lot more in Czechoslovakia than what we could buy from the official Tusex representative in Stockholm. This company was in Göteborg on the west coast. It was a person called Sven Persson which is in Swedish it's almost like a fake name because it sounds like a fake name. But that was a company name, and the money was channeled through this official contact, and they supplied us with coupons, 2/6 coupons that could be used in Czechoslovakia. It was rather complicated. It had to be stamped with a rubber stamp, I think with his signature. After some time, when this was quite a big operation, this company actually sent us a stamp so we could use ourselves at the office. Strictly, confidential, of course. And they actually offered to split the commission. So we got half the commission as well. This money, these 2/6 coupons, were sent from the foundation together with a postcard so that the recipient could send it back as a receipt. And we have in the archives of the foundation thousands of these thank you postcards.
Tak jsem říkal, že vlastně ty desky v nízkým nákladu, že to půjde, když je kapitalismus, takže to ve Švédsku půjde, takže jsem hlásil předem už teda kamarádům všem, že budu vydávat desky a zvlášť tyhle ty písničkáři, to je poměrně jednoduchý nahrát, tam žádný studio není potřeba. Tak mě to bylo jasný, i když jsem nevěděl konkrétně, jak to bude probíhat. No a když potom s náma dělali interview právě tyhle ty maoisti, tak když jsem jim to říkal, že chci vydávat desky, tak to se jim líbilo. Takže vlastně ty dva novináři se naučili zacházet s tím magnetofonem, s kterým jsem pracoval, s tou Nagrou. A odjeli do Prahy. Ta Nagra Kudelský, to je reportážní magnetofon, který je velký jako malý kufřík, takže to není problém. Oni se měli, protože byl mistrovství světa v hokeji, takže to nebylo nic divného. Ty mikrofony, to je všechno logický. Nějakým způsobem se jim povedlo, natáčeli Karáska, Soukupa, Hudku Třešňáka, Kubišov, že je nechytli. To natáčení nechytili. Přes diplomaty se poslali pásky nahraný ven a udělali jsme z toho desku. Ta se jmenovala Opusťte naši zemi v pokoji. Lämna vårt land i fred. A podtitulek Zakázaní zpěváci druhé kultury.
Well, I've been in Czechoslovakia maybe, Prague, 15 times maybe, but traveling with material maybe half a dozen times. We had this hidden compartment in the with petrol tank and maybe something else, but sometimes we just had it in like a bag or so. And remember on some occasion giving a pack of Marlboro when we passed at the border to make it a little quicker. I have one memory of buying a simple duplicating machine in Stockholm of the old type that used only blue color or the copies were just in blue. And it was a rather small machine, and you just rolled it by hand. But I had to dismantle it to make it fit. And I have a bad feeling that maybe they never could put it together again, because we didn't have any manual and lots of small parts, and I never heard of what happened with that.
Pokud jde o tyhle skandinávské dobrovolníky, tak někteří z nich tu byli také osobně tehda, ale hlavně pak ve svých zemích se věnovali sbíráním peněz na podporu například rodin vězněných artistů nebo na nějaké určité zcela konkrétní zásilky. Vím, že jednou se objevil, napřed byl ohlášen, myslím, že to bylo nějak takhle, že jo, a možná přijede takový jeden pán, který špatně vidí. Prostě někdo zařídil, že k nám do bytu přišel někdo s obrovskou videokamerou, která byla určená pro originální videožurnál nebo pro něco takového. A tu jsme teda pár dnů přechovávali a pak se ohlásil Věnek Šilhán, čili špatně vidí, a tomu jsem měl odevzdat pak tu kameru. Jo, čili to bylo taky výsledkem sbírky.
In those days, they were quite expensive to go by airplane to here. Yeah? I made some airplane trips when I was sponsored. Yeah? For instance, when I got the manuscript from, not directly, but through intermediaries of Ludwig Vaculik's Český snar, then I was able to collect money for my trip. Yeah. And it just was a plane who came from, I don't know, Zagreb or whatever it came from. It just dropped down here, opened the back doors of the plane and allow people to get out. It was only two people, me and some businessman. And I was surveilled all the time by the police everywhere. They were posted everywhere. So I went on the plane and they just took up the hatchet and we went off, you know. And I was very relieved when I did that. You know. It was quite a big package of pages, you know. I put it in I had sort of long shoes and I put it in there in order to, if they searched me, you know, because I was, so to speak, used to that they were from time to time searched me for material.
When I came into support of Charta 77, we were a bit ashamed in Denmark how late we started. It was in 86, 87. Very slow starters. Our first meeting was in the Politiken newspaper. It's a daily newspaper with a very famous editor-in-chief, Herbert Pundik, and then Arne Rudd from Dagens Nyheter. They had decided to give their Freedom Prize to Charta 77 in the person of Havel.
Niels Barfod byl jeden z takových opravdu důležitých novinářů tohohle Politiknu. No a shodou okolností teda jsem ho potkala na letišti taky, že on jede do Prahy. A říkám, no jo, to je zajímavý, že jo, jedeš do Prahy. No, jedu do Prahy. Já jsem říkala, ten se chová nějak divně, ten člověk, no. A on mi říká, můžu s tebou sedět? Já říkám, jo, můžeš, ty se nějak bojíš lítat, nebo co? A takže jsme požádali letučku, jestli by nás nedala dohromady vedle sebe teda. A on mi říká, Barfod, já jdu dát peníze Havlovi. Já říkám, jo. A kde je máš? On říkal, tady. On je prostě měl, že jo, v takový ty kapsičce, jak se nosí, turistický. No.
Of course there was always a police car standing outside. And I was told by Janok that this is what it is, so you just walk in and they can't threaten you because you are a Norwegian citizen, so there are no problems for you. I knocked on the door and Jiri Hayek opened. You know, he learned Norwegian during the Second World War when he was in prison in the Hamburg area, and where they were working during the night, he together with Norwegian prisoners, and he was a language expert. So he talked with me. He had never been in Norway, but he talked with me in Norwegian. It was not perfect, but it was absolutely possible to understand it. And it was then that he said that we have this big problem with the education of Jan Hayek. I just also said hello to Jan in the room, but then he left. But Jiri Hayek said that when Jan should go to the gymnasium, he was refused a place, even if he was a very clever student. Then he was invited by Kreisky in Vienna. And then, after that invitation, he was allowed into the gymnasium in Prague. But then they had already got messages or hints that he would not get into the university, Jan, if his father was continuing to be active in the Charta 77 movement. So he asked me, is there a possibility that Jan can be invited to Norway?
Já jsem se hlásil na architekturu, pak jsem se hlásil, že jo, když to bylo jasný, že se tam nedostanu, tak na stavárnu. A já jsem se tam dokonce na tu stavárnu i dostal, ale pak po 14 dnech, to bylo taky úplný nesmysl, že jo, mě při přednášce řekli, jako ať vstanu, a jak blbeček vstal místo, abych se na to vyprt, že jo, a abych odevzdal index a že rektor zrušil moje přijetí, no, což jako dost dobře nejde. Ano, tím skončilo moje studium.
And then the question came up of Jan Hayek coming to Norway because of this Norwegian connection way back to the time of the war. So the issue comes up of inviting Jan Hayek to come to Norway to attend the School of Architecture. And we worked on this for a long, long time, and I used to write letters on behalf of our Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and we would send them to their counterparts in Prague, or hand them over when we had meetings on various levels and so on. And so finally, actually, after many months, actually a few years of, attempting to convince the authorities to let Jan Hayek go, and also other people like Willy Brandt was involved in this and so on. So finally they gave in.
Když jsem se tam dostal, tak mě všichni měli, že jsem vlastně jako strašně levicově smýšlející, protože otec byl levicově smýšlející. A zvali mě na takový úplně obskurní záležitosti. Něco, kam se na to hrabe, nějaký okultistický sezení nebo něco takového. Protože třeba jsem se ocit, a to jsem byl asi půl roku v Norsku, já vůbec jsem nevěděl, která by. A někdo mě někam pozval a že musím přijít, že mě to bude zajímat, tak já jsem tam přišel. A ono to bylo sezení nějaký sociálně demokratický buňky, ale v tom nejluxusnější části Oslo. A tam byli prostě nějakým takovým bytě se štukama a tak. A měli tam tahací harmoniku a hráli tam nějaký prostě dělnický písně.
Then in 1989, it was 20 years ago with Jan Palach. And so we heard that there was a demonstration in Prague where they again were all arrested, and Havel was sentenced to 9 months in jail, January, February. And we organized a sympathy meeting for him in Louisiana. which is the biggest modern museum of modern art outside Copenhagen. And there were some people who had been to Prague and had news to bring. And then the owner of the museum, very sympathetic man, he said, it's all free. You're here at my museum. There's an audience auditorium for 300 people. And he took some of his postcards. He has some beautiful postcards of all the paintings he has. And he placed a postcard on each seat. And we had got the address in the Rugine prison where Havel was sitting. It was in April 89. And so everybody had a postcard, everybody had the address, and we just said, put a stamp on, write a greeting, and send it. And I later heard from Havel that he got a big bag with these postcards from the jail authorities. And he was released a few months later. Prague became a beautiful city. I remember it was worn down, grey, very sad. That's our impression. Now there are vivid colors and there's a nice atmosphere. People look happy in the tram, in the streets. They're polite, they speak languages. It seems that they have a good life. What can we expect more? There's a very nice story, actually. You know, we had a resistance movement in Denmark, like you had here. Now, but anyhow, there are two resistance movements men talking after the war. A Sunday, they meet for the first time. And they stand outside a baker's boutique. And there's a long line. Sunday afternoon, people want to buy cakes with cream and go home and sit and eat them. And then one of them says, was it really therefore we were fighting? And the other said, yes, that was why we were fighting, for that. And I think that's beautiful in the sense that, yes, peaceful people go Sunday afternoon to buy cake without the secret police, without the Gestapo, without the STB, without truncheons, without jails. What do you want more?